The Tuesday morning was hot and muggy in New York City, just as it always was in the middle of August. The clock at Grand Central Terminal read 10 o'clock when Carmen got off the bus on Park Avenue, clutching her faded, reusable grocery bag. At 72, she had the posture of someone who had lived a long life but refused to bow to adversity. Her simple floral dress was clean, but clearly worn from years of use, just like her brown Velcro shoes that knew every corner of the neighborhood. Carmen walked slowly, feeling the weight of the vegetables and fruits she had bought earlier at the Union Square Green Market. Tomatoes, zucchini, bananas, and some potatoes she'd managed to get for a good price. Her Social Security check wasn't generous, and every penny had to be stretched to its limit. But today, she wasn't just here to shop. She had a pending issue that had been bothering her for weeks. The National American Bank branch was located in an imposing mirrored glass building right in the city's financial heart. Carmen pushed through the revolving glass door and entered the spacious, air-conditioned lobby. The cold air was a stark contrast to the street's heat, making her hug her bag a little tighter. The space was modern, with light marble floors that reflected the ceiling's LED lights, black leather sofas arranged in rows, and digital screens displaying currency and stock quotes. She headed to the reception desk, where two young tellers were chatting animatedly. One of them, with straightened blonde hair and perfectly manicured nude nails, wore an impeccable navy blue pantsuit. The other, a brunette with her hair in an elaborate bun, wore a white silk blouse and a black pencil skirt. Both looked like they had stepped out of a corporate fashion magazine. When Carmen approached, they stopped their conversation and looked at her. It was a quick glance, but it was loaded with judgment. The blonde, whose name tag identified her as Jessica, raised an eyebrow slightly. The brunette, Patricia, hid a smirk as her eyes scanned the old woman's simple dress and grocery bag. "Good morning," Carmen said politely, resting one hand on the high counter. "I need to resolve a problem with my account. I'm being charged fees I don't recognize, and I've tried calling several times, but no one helps." Jessica sighed, as if she'd been interrupted from something important. Without fully looking up at Carmen, she lazily held out her hand. ID and card. Carmen opened her small cloth purse and carefully took out her documents. The teller took them mechanically, typed something into the computer with deliberate slowness, and without even looking at the screen for more than 2 seconds, handed the papers back. "You'll have to wait, Ma'am. Have a seat over there and we'll call you," Jessica said, making a vague gesture toward the sofas. "About how long, dear?" Carmen asked gently. Patricia discreetly rolled her eyes. "I don't know, Ma'am. You can say it's busy, you have to wait." Carmen nodded and walked to the sofas. She chose one in the corner near an artificial plant and sat down with the bag on her lap. The bank was indeed busy. Executives with leather briefcases, elegant women with designer handbags, young people with laptops under their arms, all flowed in and out in a constant stream. She watched patiently, waiting for her turn. 15 minutes passed, then 20, half an hour. Carmen saw 3 people who had arrived after her get called to the counter. A man in a grey suit was served by Jessica with a wide smile and a lively chat about investments. A woman in a stylish green dress received VIP treatment from Patricia, who even offered her coffee. Carmen frowned but kept waiting. Maybe they were clients with appointments, she thought, trying to be understanding. But as more time passed and more people cut in line, an unsettling feeling began to grow in her chest. By 11:30, she had been there for an hour and a half. She got up and went back to the counter. Patricia was scrolling on her phone, laughing at something on the screen. Jessica was organizing papers with a bored expression. "Excuse me, girls, I've been waiting for quite a while now. Could you please help me soon?" Carmen asked, keeping her tone polite. Jessica didn't even look up. "We already told you. You have to wait. There are people ahead of you." "But those people arrived after me," Carmen insisted, pointing to a young man in a polo shirt who had just walked in. Patricia finally looked at her, this time with poorly concealed irritation. "They have appointments, ma'am. You came in without one. Go back and wait, and we'll get to you when we can." The tone was harsh, almost hostile. Carmen felt her cheeks flush, but she took a deep breath. She wouldn't let them get to her. She returned to the sofa, now with the growing certainty that something was wrong here. Beside her, a younger woman, around 50 and well-dressed, sat down to wait for a meeting. She looked at Carmen sympathetically. "How long have you been waiting?" she asked in a low voice. "Almost 2 hours," Carmen replied. The woman grimaced. "That's absurd. They shouldn't be doing that." Carmen gave a sad half-smile. "I think it's because I don't look the way they expect." The woman was about to respond, but her name was called and she had to leave. Carmen was alone again, hugging her grocery bag, feeling the weight of the silent humiliation being imposed on her. At the counter, Jessica and Patricia were whispering and laughing, casting glances in Carmen's direction. The blonde discreetly pointed at the grocery bag, and they both laughed louder. A young man with an intern's name tag who was passing by frowned when he noticed the scene but said nothing. Noon arrived. 2 full hours of waiting. Carmen watched the bank get even busier during the lunch rush. Hurried businessmen, employees from nearby offices, all were served with speed and courtesy, except for her. That's when a security guard, a black man in his 40s named Ron, noticed the situation. He had been watching Carmen for a while, noting she'd been there since his shift started. He approached the tellers. "Ladies, hasn't that woman over there been waiting a long time?" he asked, discreetly pointing to Carmen. Jessica shrugged. "She has to wait. It's busy." "But I saw you help several people who came in after her," Ron insisted. Patricia glared at him. "Ron, you're security. Mind your own area and let us do our jobs." "I just think it's unfair. She's an elderly woman and she's holding a heavy bag." Jessica crossed her arms. "Look, she's retired. She has nothing better to do. She can wait. And that grocery bag of hers isn't our problem." Ron shook his head, disgusted, but he knew he didn't have the authority to intervene further. He walked away, but continued to watch the situation from a distance. Carmen remained seated, but now she took a small notebook from her purse and began to jot down details: her arrival time, the tellers' names from their tags, a description of their behavior. Her daughter always said she was meticulous, and that trait was now proving useful. 1 o'clock. 3 hours of waiting. Hunger was starting to set in, but Carmen wasn't leaving without resolving her problem. More people continued to be served ahead of her. A young man with a backpack and brand-name sneakers, a female executive with a tablet, a gentleman in a suit who was received like royalty. At 2 o'clock, 4 hours after she had arrived, Carmen stood up again. This time her patience had run out. She walked to the counter with firm steps, despite the weariness in her legs. "I need to speak with the manager." "Now," she said, in a voice that would brook no further delay. Jessica rolled her eyes openly. "The manager is busy." "Then I'll wait for him to be free, but I'll wait right here in front of the counter for everyone to see," Carmen replied, planting herself right there. Patricia huffed. "You're being ridiculous, ma'am." "Am I the one being ridiculous? Or are you two for making me wait 4 hours while you serve everyone else?" "Who walks in?" Carmen retorted, raising her voice slightly. The argument started to draw attention. Other customers looked on curiously. Ron approached again, ready to step in if needed. Just then, a glass door in the back opened, and a man in his mid-40s wearing an expensive grey suit and a burgundy tie strode out. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone a mix of authority and annoyance. Jessica was quick to answer. "Manager Chris, this lady is making a scene because she doesn't want to wait her turn." Carmen faced him. "I've been waiting for 4 hours, sir. I arrived at 10 this morning, and these young women made me wait while they served dozens of people who came in after me. I need to resolve some improper charges on my account, and I've been treated with disrespect." Chris, the manager, adjusted his tie and gestured for Carmen to follow him. "Come with me, we'll sort this out in my office." Carmen picked up her bag and followed him. The office was large, with a mahogany desk, leather chairs, and a panoramic view of the avenue. Chris sat in his swivel chair and pointed to a chair for Carmen. "ID and card, please," he requested, turning on his computer. Carmen handed them over. Chris typed, analyzed the screen, and his expression subtly changed. He saw it was an old account, opened decades ago, but with no major transactions or investments, just a monthly Social Security deposit and regular withdrawals. "How long have you been banking with us, ma'am?" he asked. 32 years. I see. And what exactly is the problem? Carmen explained about the improper fees, the failed attempts to contact them by phone, and, most importantly, the humiliating wait she had just endured. Chris listened with a neutral, almost indifferent expression. When she finished, he took a deep breath. Look, Mrs. Anderson, I'll be frank with you. These are system fees. Everyone pays them. But I didn't sign up for these services, she insisted. Sometimes the system generates automatic charges. I'll see what I can do, but I can't promise anything. And what about the treatment I received out there? Chris shrugged. The branch was busy. The girls were just doing their jobs. Perhaps you're exaggerating a little. Exaggerating? Carmen felt indignation rise within her. I was ignored for 4 hours. I saw with my own eyes. Dozens of people being served before me. Ma'am, with all due respect, you're retired. You don't have urgent appointments. Other people had scheduled meetings, business matters. It's normal for them to be prioritized. Carmen clenched her fists over her bag. I'm going to speak with this bank's board of directors, Chris laughed, a mocking laugh that echoed through the office. You're going to speak with the board? And how do you plan on doing that? Do you have their private numbers? Do you know someone upstairs? Carmen didn't answer immediately. She just stared at him with a calmness that contrasted with his arrogance. Then slowly she opened her purse and took out a simple flip phone, one of those with a physical keypad and a small screen. I'll call right now if you don't mind, she said. Chris crossed his arms, still smirking. Be my guest. I'd love to watch. Carmen dialed a number and put it on speakerphone. The ringing tone echoed in the office's silence. Once, twice. On the third ring, someone answered. Hi, Mom, said a firm, authoritative female voice from the other end. Chris's smirk froze. Hi, honey, Carmen replied, her voice serene. Sorry to bother. You at work, but I need your help. Of course, Mom, what happened? Are you okay? I'm fine, but I've been at a bank branch for 4 hours. I was humiliated by the tellers, ignored, and now the manager is telling me I'm exaggerating. There was a pause on the other end. When the voice returned, it was icy. Which branch? Park Avenue, number 3500. Put the manager on, now. Chris was pale. His hands were trembling as he took the phone Carmen held out to him. Hello, he said, his voice cracking. The voice coming from the speakerphone was as sharp as a razor blade. Manager Chris, I presume, the woman on the other end said, leaving no room for formalities. Yes, ma'am, he replied, swallowing hard. The last name printed on his name tag suddenly felt like it weighed a ton. My name is Marianne Anderson, and I'm the regional CEO of National American Bank for the entire state of New York. The woman sitting in front of you is my mother, Carmen Anderson, and from what I understand, she has been subjected to absolutely unacceptable treatment at the branch under your management. Chris tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. His face, once flushed with arrogance, was now ashen. The hands holding the phone were visibly shaking. Mrs. Anderson, I didn't know. There's been a misunderstanding, he began, but was cut off. I don't care what you knew or didn't know. What I care about is that my mother arrived at a bank branch at 10 in the morning to resolve a legitimate issue, and it is now 2:15 in the afternoon. 4 hours and 15 minutes. She was left waiting while other customers were served. That is discrimination, it is abuse, and it is a direct violation of every customer service protocol I have personally implemented at this institution. Carmen remained seated, watching Chris crumble before her eyes. There was no satisfaction on her face, only the quiet dignity of someone who knew justice was finally being served. I'll resolve Mrs. Carmen's problem immediately, Chris stammered, already typing frantically on his computer. No, you won't do anything else. I'll be there in 20 minutes. In the meantime, I want you to gather the entire team that interacted with my mother today. All the tellers, all the staff. I want names, name tags, shifts. And Chris, if you even think about hiding anything or manipulating this situation, I guarantee your career at this bank ends today. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Ma'am. Put my mother back on. Chris handed the phone back to Carmen as if it were a hot coal. The elderly woman took the device calmly. Hi, honey, she said softly. Mom, are you really okay? Do you need anything? Water? Food? I'm fine, dear. Don't worry about me. I've been through worse. I know, Mom. But that doesn't mean you should have to accept this kind of treatment. I'm leaving. My meeting now and I'm on my way. I love you. I love you too, honey. The call ended. Carmen put the phone back in her purse and looked at Chris, who remained frozen behind his desk. May I wait here, or would you prefer I go back to the lobby? She asked, with a subtle hint of irony. You can stay here, please, he replied quickly. I'll have them bring you water, coffee, whatever you'd like. Water is fine. Chris pressed a button on the intercom and made the request in a trembling voice. Then he got up and left the office, leaving the door ajar. Carmen could hear his agitated voice giving orders outside. Jessica, Patricia, both of you in my office now. And I want Ron, too. I want everyone who was in the lobby this morning identified quickly. In the lobby, the atmosphere had changed completely. Jessica and Patricia, who were still at the counter, exchanged worried glances. What do you think happened? Jessica whispered. I don't know, but the manager is freaking out, Patricia replied, a knot forming in her stomach. Chris appeared at the counter, sweating and with wide eyes. You two, stop what you're doing and follow me now. But there are customers waiting, Jessica protested. I don't care, move. The two of them dropped everything and followed the manager, their high heels clicking on the marble floor. Ron, the security guard, was also called. When they entered the office and saw Carmen sitting there calmly, sipping water from a paper cup, they knew something was very wrong. Do you know who this woman is? Chris asked, pointing to Carmen. A customer, Patricia answered, confused. She is the mother of our regional CEO, Marianne Anderson, and Ms. Anderson is on her way here. Right now because you two treated her mother like garbage for 4 hours. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica turned white. Patricia brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. Ron, on the other hand, had to hide a smile of satisfaction. This can't be happening, Jessica murmured. It is happening, Chris confirmed. And when Ms. Anderson gets here, she's going to want explanations, so I suggest you start thinking very carefully about what you're going to say. But, sir, we didn't know who she was, Patricia began, her voice failing. And does that change anything? Chris exploded. You're supposed to treat every customer with respect, no matter who they are. But you didn't, did you? I saw it in the system. Dozens of transactions were processed while Mrs. Anderson waited. Why? Jessica tried to explain. They were scheduled appointments, investors, people in a hurry. That's a lie, Ron interjected, speaking for the first time. I was in the lobby. I saw you helping walk-ins. I saw you laughing and pointing at her. I heard the comments about her grocery bag. Chris closed his eyes, feeling the situation worsen by the second. Carmen just watched, silent. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence there was judgment enough. All of you will stay here and wait for Ms. Anderson's arrival, Chris ordered. Nobody leaves this room. The minutes that followed were torturous. Jessica cried softly, her makeup smudging. Patricia chewed on her perfectly manicured nails, ruining the polish. Chris paced back and forth, mentally rehearsing what he would say. Ron stood with his arms crossed, a silent witness to it all. Carmen, for her part, remained serene. She opened her grocery bag, took out a banana, and began to peel it calmly. She hadn't eaten since breakfast and needed some energy. The simple act seemed to amplify the other's discomfort. 18 minutes later, the sound of screeching tires in front of the bank caught everyone's attention. Through the office window, they could see 3 black luxury cars double-parked, blocking part of the avenue. Security guards in suits got out first, opening doors. And then she appeared. Marianne Anderson was 47, with black hair pulled back in a flawless bun, wearing a navy blue pantsuit that cost more than anyone in that branch made in a month. Her Louboutin heels clicked with authority on the floor. She wore thin, gold-rimmed glasses that gave her an even more imposing air. 2 assistants followed her, carrying tablets and folders. The CEO entered the bank like an elegant hurricane. The entire lobby fell silent. Customers stopped their transactions. Employees froze. She didn't even look around, just asked the first person she saw, "Manager's office." Someone pointed, and she followed, her assistants 2 steps behind. When the office door opened, everyone inside stood up automatically, except for Carmen, who remained seated. "Mom," Marianne said, and for a moment, all the hardness in her face vanished. She crossed the room and hugged Carmen gently, as if embracing something precious and fragile. "Are you okay?" I am now, my dear. Now I am. Marianne pulled back, checked that her mother was truly all right, and then turned to the others. Her face was once again a mask of cold authority. Manager Chris Santos, I presume? Yes, ma'am, he answered, his voice hoarse. And these are the tellers, Jessica Oliver and Patricia Mendez. The two women nodded, unable to speak. And you are? Marianne asked Ron. Ron Ferreira, security, ma'am. I'm here because I tried to intervene when I saw what was happening. To Mrs. Anderson. Marianne nodded. You stay. The rest of you can start explaining how a customer, any customer, can wait 4 hours in a bank branch without being served. Mrs. Anderson, Chris began, there was a communication breakdown. A communication breakdown, Marianne repeated, her tone dangerously low. My mother arrived here at 10 in the morning. It is now 2:40 in the afternoon. 4 hours and 40 minutes. That's not a communication breakdown. That's negligence. That's discrimination. The tellers didn't know who she was, Chris tried. And should they have to know in order to treat her with respect? Marianne cut in. That is precisely the problem. You only treat people well who appear to have money, power, influence. Someone who comes in wearing simple clothes, carrying a grocery bag, is automatically considered less important, less worthy of attention. Is that it? It wasn't because of that, Jessica started, but her voice failed her. It wasn't? Marianne took a step toward her. Then explain to me why, according to the system records my assistant is already reviewing, 43 transactions were completed in this branch between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. 43, and my mother, who arrived at 10 sharp, was not among them. One of Marianne's assistants showed the tablet with the data. Chris looked and turned even paler. There was no denying the numbers. Marianne continued. Do you want to know why my mother was here today? I'll tell you. She was acting as a secret shopper. Secret shopper, Chris repeated, confused. Yes. It's a program I implemented 6 months ago in all branches in the region. We hire ordinary people with diverse appearances, different ages, varied social classes, to test our customer service, to verify if we are truly fulfilling our mission as an inclusive and human-centered bank, and my mother generously volunteered for a few tests. Carmen took another sip of water, observing the reactions. Marianne went on. This wasn't her first visit. Over the last 3 weeks, my mother has visited 5 different branches. 4 of them treated her wonderfully. 1 of them treated her like you did today. Guess which one? No one answered. Exactly. This branch, the model branch on Park Avenue, the one that's supposed to be the gold standard for excellent service. And you know what my mother discovered? That you are excellent at serving executives, business owners, premium clients. But when someone simple comes in, someone who looks like they don't have money, the treatment changes completely. Patricia started to cry openly now. Jessica kept her eyes down, her hands shaking. Chris looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Marianne opened her own folder and took out some documents. Here are the reports from the other visits. Here are the testimonies from other secret shoppers who have been to this branch. The pattern is clear. Discrimination based on appearance. Prioritizing clients who seem to have more resources. Systematic disrespect for the elderly. Simple people. Blue-collar workers. Marianne walked to the office window, looking at the traffic on Park Avenue below. The silence in the room was suffocating. When she turned around again, her face was even more serious. Do you know what the mission of National American Bank is? She asked, but didn't wait for an answer. To serve all Americans with dignity and respect, regardless of their origin, social class, or appearance. That mission is posted in every branch, on every piece of corporate material, in every training you take. But apparently they're just pretty words on a wall. Ms. Anderson, I can explain, Chris tried. One more time, but she held up a hand, silencing him. You will have your chance to explain, all of you will, but not here. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I want all of you at the corporate headquarters, 12th floor conference room. There will be a formal hearing with the Human Resources Department, the Ombudsman's Office, and the Ethics Committee. Each of you will testify about what happened today. Jessica sobbed louder. Patricia wiped her tears with the back of her hands, smudging her makeup even more. Chris nodded mechanically like an automaton. "But before that," Marianne continued, "I want you to solve my mother's problem now, immediately. These improper charges she mentioned. I want to see the statement, I want to see the fees, and I want to see everything reversed in the next 5 minutes." Chris practically ran to the computer. His fingers flew across the keyboard, opening screens, checking transactions. Carmen got up and went to the desk, pointing out the amounts she didn't recognize. "There, this maintenance fee. This one for an additional card I never asked for. This insurance I never signed up for." Marianne watched over the manager's shoulder. Chris, sweating profusely, confirmed each irregularity. "How did this happen?" he muttered more to himself. "I'll tell you how it happened," Marianne replied. "It happened because you have abusive sales quotas for products. It happened because someone in this branch or in telemarketing decided to push services on an elderly client who probably wouldn't question it. It happened because there is a culture of profit at any cost, without regard for ethics." Chris didn't answer, just kept processing the reversals. $540 in improper charges accumulated over the last 6 months. For someone living on a social security check barely above minimum wage, it was a fortune. "Done," he said, turning the screen so Carmen could see. "All the amounts have been reversed. The money will be available in your account within 2 hours." Carmen checked carefully, took the receipt he printed, and put it in her purse. Marianne placed a hand on her mother's shoulder. "Let's go, Mom. You've spent far too long in this place." Before they left, Marianne turned one last time to the employees. "Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Don't be late. Your careers depend on it." Mother and daughter left the office together. The branch lobby was still silent. All. The employees and customers had realized something serious was happening. When they saw the regional CEO leaving with the simply dressed woman who had waited for hours, the whispers began. Marianne led her mother to the car, a black sedan with tinted windows. The driver opened the back door and Carmen got in, still holding her grocery bag. Marianne got in on the other side. "Mom, I'm sorry I asked you to do this," Marianne said as soon as the car pulled away. "You don't need to apologize, honey. It was important. I saw with my own eyes how people are treated when they don't have power. Even so, I shouldn't have let you go through that." Carmen held her daughter's hand. "I've been through much worse in my life. You know that. Remember when you were little and I cleaned offices at night to pay for your tutoring? Remember when your father left us and I had to work 3 jobs to keep you in school? Today was just another day." Marianne felt her eyes well up, but held back the tears. This was exactly why she had gotten to where she was, so her mother would never have to endure humiliation again, so she could live with dignity. "Do you want to go home or would you rather get lunch first?" Marianne asked. "Let's get lunch. I'm hungry, and that banana wasn't enough." They went to an elegant restaurant on the Upper East Side, a place Carmen would normally find intimidating, but Marianne insisted. She wanted to spoil her mother after what she had faced. During lunch, they talked about pleasantries, about family, about the grandkids. But Marianne's mind was already working on what would come next. That night, in her luxury apartment in Tribeca, Marianne sat in her home office and began reviewing all the secret shopper reports from the past few weeks. Not just her mother's, but those of dozens of other people hired for the program. The numbers were disturbing. Of the 50 branches tested in the New York metropolitan area, 13 showed clear patterns of discrimination, differentiated service based on appearance, deliberate delays for customers who seemed simpler, veiled or explicit rudeness. The Park Avenue branch was one of the worst, but it wasn't alone. Marianne took notes, highlighted the most serious cases, and prepared presentations. The next day's meeting would be just the beginning. She planned a complete overhaul of the service culture in all the branches under her responsibility. Meanwhile, in Carmen's modest house in Park Slope, the elderly woman was preparing her simple dinner: rice, beans, a fried egg. She sat at the table alone, as she had every night since she was widowed 15 years ago. The TV in the living room was on the news, but she wasn't paying attention. She thought about the day she'd had. She thought about how it felt to be ignored, to be treated as invisible. She thought about how many other people went through that every day but didn't have a CEO daughter to call. How many elderly people, how many poor people, how many simple workers were silently humiliated. She had raised Marianne on her own, with sacrifice and love. She had worked as a cleaner, a cook, a laundress, anything that paid the bills. She had never graduated from college, never held an important position, but she had given her daughter every opportunity she herself never had, and Marianne had seized every one of them. Carmen smiled, remembering her little girl studying by candlelight when the power was out because they hadn't paid the bill. She remembered teenage Marianne winning a full scholarship to a private high school. She remembered her graduation with a business degree, then the MBA, then the meteoric rise in the corporate world. Today, Marianne was one of the most respected executives in the American banking sector, but to Carmen, she was just the girl who still called every day, who insisted on paying for a better health plan for her mother, who always visited on Sundays for lunch. The phone rang. It was Marianne. "Hi, Mom. Did you sleep well?" "I'm not asleep yet, honey. I'm just having dinner. I ate too much at lunch. I could only manage some tea just now. Mom, I wanted to let you know tomorrow is going to be a tough day. I'm going to have to make some difficult decisions." "I know, honey. Do what you have to do." "Are you sure you're okay with all this? You're not upset with me for asking you to do this test?" Carmen chuckled softly. "Honey, I volunteered. Remember, you didn't even want it to be me. You were worried, but I insisted, and I'm glad I did. Those people need to learn. A lesson. They will, I promise you. Just don't be too hard on them, my dear. Remember that you were young once and made mistakes too." "Mom, what they did wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate cruelty. But I will be fair. I promise." They said their goodbyes and Carmen finished her dinner. Before bed, she knelt beside her bed, as she did every night, and prayed. She gave thanks for her blessings, asked for protection for her daughter and grandchildren, and prayed for wisdom for everyone involved in what was to come. The next morning, Wednesday, dawned overcast in New York City. Chris woke up at 5 a.m., unable to sleep any longer. His wife noticed his restlessness. "What's wrong?" she asked sleepily. "That meeting today. I think I'm going to be fired." "You don't know that. Maybe it's just a reprimand." Chris shook his head. "You didn't see her face, the regional CEO. She was furious, and she had every right to be. I was an idiot." He got up, took a long shower, and chose his best suit. If he was going to be fired, at least he would go out with dignity. He had coffee without an appetite and left the house 2 hours earlier than necessary. Jessica also woke up early, but for a different reason. She had spent the night awake, crying, replaying every moment of the previous day. Her mother, with whom she lived in an apartment in Astoria, had tried to console her. "Honey, everyone makes mistakes. You'll get through this." "But Mom, I was horrible to that woman. I laughed at her, ignored her, treated her like trash. And she was the CEO's mother. The CEO's mother. Her mother knew it wasn't just the fear of losing her job. It was the shame, the guilty conscience." Jessica looked at herself in the mirror and didn't like the person she saw. Patricia had an equally difficult night. She lived alone in a studio in Williamsburg, supported by her bank salary and some extra cash she made selling financial products. If she got fired, she wouldn't be able to pay her rent. She'd have to move back in with her parents in upstate New York. She'd have to admit she had failed in the city. She arrived at the bank's headquarters at 8:40, 20 minutes before the meeting. Chris was already there, sitting in a chair in the 12th floor reception area. Jessica arrived 5 minutes later. The three of them looked at each other but didn't speak. What was there to say? At 9 o'clock sharp, they were called in. The conference room was large, with a massive oval table of dark wood. On one side sat Marianne Anderson, the Director of Human Resources, Richard Campbell, the representative from the Ombudsman's Office, Anna Peterson, and the Director of Ethics and Compliance, Frank Miller. On the other side, 3 empty chairs awaited them. "Please sit," Marianne said in a neutral voice. They obeyed. The meeting began with a cold formality that made the gravity of the situation clear. Richard Campbell, the HR director, a man in his mid-50s with graying hair and reading glasses hanging around his neck, opened a thick folder full of documents. "This is a formal disciplinary investigation meeting," he announced in a grave voice. Everything said here is being recorded for internal records. You have the right to explain yourselves, to present your version of the facts, and to request union representation if you wish. Would anyone like to make any of these requests before we begin?" The three of them shook their heads. They were resigned to what was coming. Marianne maintained an impenetrable expression, her hands clasped on the table. Beside her, Anna Peterson, a black woman in her 40s with long braids pulled back in a ponytail, opened her own laptop. "Let's start with the facts," Anna said. "Yesterday, August 3rd, at 10 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Carmen Anderson entered the Park Avenue branch to resolve a legitimate issue with her bank account. Improper charges that had previously been reported by phone without resolution. Is that correct so far?" Silence. Then Chris answered, "Correct." Mrs. Anderson was initially assisted by receptionists Jessica Oliver and Patricia Mendez. What happened during that first contact? Jessica swallowed hard. "She asked for help with the charges. I took her documents and asked her to wait." "And what was the estimated wait time you gave her?" Jessica lowered her eyes. "I didn't give a specific time." "Why not?" Anna asked. "Because it was busy. There were a lot of people." Frank Miller, the director of ethics, a thin man with heavy-framed glasses, intervened. "According to the system logs, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., 43 transactions were processed at that branch. Mrs. Anderson was not among them despite arriving at the beginning of that period. How is that possible if it was so busy?" Patricia tried to answer. "Some clients had prior appointments." 43 appointments in 4 hours? Frank questioned with obvious skepticism. "We have the records here. Only 17 were confirmed appointments. The other 26 were walk-ins, meaning people who arrived without an appointment, just like Mrs. Anderson." The heavy silence returned to the room. Jessica and Patricia knew there was no escaping the numbers. Marianne finally spoke, her voice cutting through the air like ice. "I'm going to ask a direct question, and I expect an honest answer. Why did you two leave my mother waiting while you served other people who arrived after her?" Jessica started crying again, but Patricia, gathering some desperate courage, decided to be honest. "Because she looked like a simple person, with old clothes and a grocery bag. We thought she wasn't an important client." The room fell into absolute silence for several long seconds. Richard Campbell closed his eyes, shaking his head. Anna typed furiously on her laptop. Frank adjusted his glasses, incredulous. Marianne took a deep breath before continuing. "So you admit that you discriminated against my mother based on her appearance, based on the assumption that she didn't have enough money or relevance to deserve attention?" Patricia nodded, tears finally streaming down her face. "Yes, that's what we did. And I know it was horrible, I know." Jessica sobbed. "We were wrong, so wrong. We made comments about her bag. We laughed. We made jokes. It was cruel. There's no excuse." Chris remained silent, but his turn was coming. Marianne turned to him. "And you, manager Chris Santos, when my mother finally managed to speak with you after a 4-hour. Wait, how did you react?" Chris took a deep breath. "I looked at her account in the system. I saw it was an old account, but with no major activity, no significant investments. And I, wrongly, downplayed her problem. I said she was exaggerating. I implied she didn't have important commitments because she was retired. And when she said she would speak to the board, what did you do?" Marianne continued. "I laughed. I mocked her. I asked her how she would ever get access to the bank's top executives." Chris replied, his voice thick with emotion. "It was the most stupid and arrogant thing I've ever done in my career." Richard Campbell took the floor. "Manager Chris, you are aware that as the branch leader, you had the responsibility to ensure all employees followed the protocols for humane customer service. How many training sessions on this have you attended in the last 2 years?" Chris thought. 5, maybe 6. 6 training sessions, Richard repeated. In each one, it was emphasized that discrimination based on appearance, social class, age, or any other factor is unacceptable and grounds for termination with cause. You signed a commitment form after each training, correct? "Correct," Chris admitted. Frank Miller opened another document. "In addition to yesterday's incident, we have other reports. 3 secret shoppers visited your branch in the last 6 weeks. 2 were treated appropriately. 1, a 63-year-old woman dressed simply, reported an experience similar to Mrs. Anderson's. A prolonged wait, curt service, prioritization of apparently wealthier clients. Are you aware of this? Chris shook his head. No, I wasn't. As manager, it's your duty to monitor the quality of service, Frank reprimanded. Your negligence allowed a discriminatory culture to take root among your team. Anna intervened. I'd also like to address the issue of the improper charges. Mrs. Anderson reported $540 in unauthorized fees accumulated over 6 months. How did that happen? Chris sighed. Probably product bundling done by telemarketing or the branch itself. We have very aggressive sales targets. Sometimes employees end up offering services insistently or even activating them without the client's clear consent. And you, as manager, monitored these practices? Anna asked. Not as much as I should have, Chris admitted. I was focused on hitting the targets. So you prioritized numbers over ethics, Anna concluded. Yes, I did. Marianne stood up and walked to the window. From up there she could see the entire city spread out before her, millions of people, each with their own stories, their struggles, their dignity. And inside the banks of this city, how many were being treated the way her mother had been? She turned around. Do you know why I created the Secret Shopper program? She asked, but continued without waiting for an answer. Because numbers lie. Satisfaction surveys lie. People are afraid to complain, afraid of retaliation, afraid of not being heard. So I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Or rather, through the eyes of ordinary people you wouldn't recognize as important. Marianne returned to the table. My mother isn't just my mother. She represents millions of Americans who walk into bank branches every day and are invisible to you. They are the domestic workers, the delivery drivers, the retirees, the self-employed, people who support this country with their sweat, but are treated like second-class citizens because they don't wear a suit or carry a briefcase. Jessica was now crying openly. Patricia had her face buried in her hands. Chris stared blankly at the table. Richard Campbell picked up 3 separate envelopes. After reviewing the facts, testimonies, and evidence presented, the Human Resources Department, in conjunction with the Ombudsman's Office and the Ethics and Compliance Department, has reached the following conclusions and determinations. He opened the first envelope. Jessica Oliver and Patricia Mendez, for direct and serious violation of the institution's Code of Ethics and Conduct, for proven discrimination based on appearance and social class, and for behavior that brought discredit to the bank's image, you are being terminated with cause, effective immediately. The 2 young women began to sob uncontrollably. Jessica tried to speak. Please, I need this job. I have bills to pay. We all do, Richard replied without emotion. That should have been considered before you humiliated an elderly customer. He opened the second envelope. Manager Chris Santos. Although your conduct was equally serious, we consider that part of the responsibility lies with the pressure for targets and the corporate culture you helped perpetuate, but which was also imposed upon you. Therefore, you will not be fired, but you will be demoted. You will lose your management position and be transferred to an administrative role with no team leadership, with a corresponding salary reduction. Furthermore, you will be required to undergo an intensive 3-month ethical and humanistic retraining program before you can apply for any leadership position again. Chris nodded slowly. It was more than he deserved, and he knew it. Marianne added, I want to make it clear that these decisions are not personal. They are institutional. If it hadn't been my mother, if it had been any other secret shopper or any real customer, the consequences would be the same. We cannot have a culture of half-respect. It's either total or it doesn't exist. Anna closed her laptop. The employees have until the end of today to collect their personal belongings from the branch. They will be accompanied by security and an HR representative. Manager Chris will have 1 week to transition his responsibilities before assuming his new role. The meeting was over. Jessica and Patricia left first, destroyed. Chris stayed for a moment longer. Ms. Anderson, he said before leaving, I just wanted to apologize. Not to you, because I don't deserve your time, but to your mother. I was cruel and arrogant to her, and she deserved none of it. Marianne stared at him. You will have the chance to apologize to her in person. It will be part of your retraining process, but for now just leave and think about the kind of leader you want to be from now on. Chris left. When the door closed, Richard commented, You were tough, but fair. Not tough enough, Marianne replied, but I need to balance justice with the opportunity for redemption. The tellers crossed a line that cannot be forgiven institutionally. They'll have to learn that lesson somewhere else. Chris can still learn it here. Frank agreed. And what about the branch? What's the next step? Marianne already had it all planned. We're implementing immediate changes. First, a new manager, someone with a proven track record of human-centered management. Second, a complete retraining of the entire branch staff, not just on protocols but on real empathy. Third, the installation of an anonymous feedback system where customers can report discrimination in real time. And fourth, an increase in the frequency of secret shopper visits. Anna added, I also suggest that this branch become a pilot for a broader cultural transformation program. If we can turn the culture around there, we prove it's possible anywhere. Approved, Marianne said. Make it happen. The next 3 months were a period of intense transformation. The Park Avenue branch became a laboratory for a new service culture that Marianne envisioned for the entire bank. A new manager was appointed, Paul H. Adams, a 42-year-old man who had distinguished himself at a branch in a less affluent part of Queens, precisely for treating all customers with equal dignity, regardless of how much money they had. Paul arrived with a clear mission: rebuild trust, re-educate the team, and prove that it was possible to be profitable without being predatory. In the first few days, he gathered all the employees and told them the story of what had happened, not to shame them, but so they would understand the gravity and never repeat the mistakes. The story of the woman who was humiliated and then revealed to be the CEO's mother spread quickly throughout the banking system. It became an urban legend, a topic at happy hours, a theme in training sessions. Some details were exaggerated, others downplayed, but the essence remained: never judge a customer by their appearance. Jessica and Patricia, after being let go, faced very different realities. Jessica moved back in with her parents in Newark. She got a job in a clothing store at the mall, earning less than half of what she made at the bank. The first few days were filled with deep shame. She avoided looking customers in the eye, especially the older, simpler ones. It was a woman in her 70s who came into the store looking for a dress for her granddaughter's wedding, who forced Jessica to face her demons. The woman was humble, dressed simply, and Jessica felt a pang in her chest when she saw her. Automatically, her old training wanted to judge, but she forced herself to stop. "Can I help you, Mum?" Jessica asked with genuine kindness. "I'm looking for something nice but not too expensive," the woman replied shyly. "It's for my granddaughter's wedding." Jessica spent the next hour helping that woman. She showed her options, suggested combinations, and complimented her when she tried on a light blue dress that looked beautiful on her. When the sale was complete, the woman thanked her with tears in her eyes. "You are so kind, young lady. Not all salespeople treat people like me with such care." Jessica felt a lump in her throat. "It's the least I can do, Mum. You deserve respect, just like everyone else." When the woman left, Jessica locked herself in the store's bathroom and cried. She cried for the person she had become. She cried for Carmen, whom she had humiliated. She cried for the lost chance. But she also cried with relief, because she realized there was still time to change, to be a better person. Patricia had an even harder path. Unable to find a formal job quickly, she started working as a self-employed cosmetic saleswoman. She went door to door, faced daily rejections, and felt firsthand what it was like to be invisible to people. One afternoon, she rang the doorbell of a luxury apartment. An elegant woman opened the door, looked Patricia up and down with disdain and said, "I don't buy anything from door-to-door salespeople," and slammed the door in her face. Patricia stood in the hallway, feeling the humiliation burn, and then she understood. That was exactly what she had done to Carmen, judged, despised, diminished. The tears came, but with them came a determination. She would not be defined by the worst moment of her life. She would rebuild herself a better person, a better professional. Meanwhile, Chris was going through the most intense retraining program of his life. 3 months of workshops on ethics, empathy, and human-centered leadership. He was required to work for a week as a bank teller to feel the pressure of frontline employees. He was required to shadow customers in vulnerable situations to understand their realities. The hardest part was when he had to write a formal letter of apology to Carmen. He spent days drafting, tearing up, and starting over. How could he ask for forgiveness for so much arrogance, so much prejudice? Finally, he wrote something honest and gave it to the HR department, which forwarded it to Marianne. The CEO read the letter in her office. It was sincere, without cheap excuses, without trying to play the victim. Chris took full responsibility and asked for forgiveness, not to be absolved, but because he recognized he had been gravely wrong. Marianne took the letter to her mother during their Sunday lunch. Carmen read it in silence, her reading glasses resting on the tip of her nose. When she finished, she folded the paper carefully. "He seems sincere," she commented. "He does," Marianne agreed, "but only time will tell if it's real change or just temporary guilt." "Even so, I accept his apology," Carmen said. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over." "You're too generous, Mom," Carmen smiled. "I'm not generous. I'm just a realist. Holding a grudge doesn't hurt the person who wronged you. It hurts you. I forgive him. But I hope he's a better person from now on." Weeks turned into months. The Park Avenue branch began to show surprising results. Against all expectations of the skeptics who thought human-centered service would hurt profits, the branch saw its numbers improve. Customer satisfaction rose, complaints dropped drastically, and, curiously, product sales increased. Paul explained the phenomenon in meetings with other managers. When you treat people with respect, they trust you, and when they trust you, they buy. It's that simple. We don't need to shove products down their throats. We need to offer real solutions for real needs. Marianne monitored everything closely. She would visit the branch unannounced, observe the interactions, and talk to customers in line. She herself would dress more simply on some visits, testing whether the lesson had truly been internalized, and most of the time she was pleased with what she saw. But she knew the work was far from over. One transformed branch was just one victory. She had dozens of others under her responsibility. The Secret Shopper program was expanded. More people were hired, from diverse backgrounds and origins. The elderly, young people from the outer boroughs, people with disabilities, gig workers. They all entered the branches and tested the service. The results were compiled monthly. Branches with poor performance received immediate intervention. Managers were summoned, teams were retrained, and some employees were let go when discrimination was blatant and repeated. Branches with good performance received public recognition and bonuses. The transformation was neither easy nor quick, but it was real. Old-timers, accustomed to the old culture, resisted. Some quit, preferring to work at institutions where they could keep their prejudices. Others, reluctantly at first, began to realize that treating everyone with dignity was not only the right thing to do, but also made their jobs more rewarding. 3 months after the incident, on a sunny morning in November, Carmen returned to the Park Avenue branch, not for banking needs this time, but because Marianne had asked her to. There was a symbolic inauguration of the new culture, an internal event to celebrate the transformation. When Carmen entered, wearing the same simple dress from that fateful August morning and purposefully carrying a grocery bag, the atmosphere was completely different. The receptionist, a young black woman named Alyssa who had been recently hired, smiled genuinely. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" "I came to visit. My daughter works here," Carmen replied, a smile playing on her lips. "That's wonderful. She'll be happy to see you. Would you like me to let someone know?" "No need, dear. I'm just going to look around." Carmen walked through the lobby. She observed the employees serving customers of all kinds. A man in overalls, apparently straight from a construction site, being treated with the same attention as an executive in a suit. A woman with shopping bags being patiently helped by a young teller who was explaining investment options suitable for her situation. Ron, the security guard, was there. When he saw Carmen, his eyes lit up. He approached her. "Mrs. Anderson, what a pleasure to see you again, and under much better circumstances this time." "Hi, Ron. I see you're still here." "I am. And now I work in a place I'm proud of. Things have changed a lot. You wouldn't believe it." "Oh, I can imagine," Carmen said, looking around. "You helped make this change. You were the one who tried to stand up for me that day." Ron blushed a little. "I just did what was right. And sometimes, that's all we need. People doing what's right." Paul, the new manager, appeared and greeted Carmen with respect. "Mrs. Anderson, it's an honor to have you here. I'd like to give you a tour of the branch, show you the changes we've implemented." Carmen accepted. Paul showed her the new ticketing system that prioritized the elderly and people, with reduced mobility, but ensured fair service for everyone. He showed her the feedback board where customers could anonymously rate each interaction. He showed her the employee break room where they had installed motivational quotes about empathy and respect. The most symbolic change was on the main wall of the lobby. A large plaque read, "In this bank, everyone is welcome. Your dignity does not depend on your account balance." Below it was a photo of diverse people of all ages, colors and styles smiling. Carmen stood for a few minutes looking at that plaque. She felt her eyes well up, but they were happy tears. Tears of someone who sees that suffering was not in vain, that it bore fruit. Marianne arrived shortly after, coming from a meeting at headquarters. When she saw her mother there, she stopped at the door and just watched for a moment. Her mother, the woman who had scrubbed floors to pay for her education, was now changing the culture of one of the country's largest financial institutions. "Mom," Marianne called, crossing the lobby. "Hi, honey," Carmen replied, opening her arms for a hug. They embraced there in the middle of the bank under the emotional gazes of employees and customers who knew the story. It was a brief but powerful moment. "What do you think?" Marianne asked. "I think you're doing something important, something that goes beyond numbers and profits." "I learned from the best," Marianne said, squeezing her mother's hand. That afternoon there was a small internal ceremony. Marianne gave an emotional speech to the branch team, recalling what had happened 3 months earlier without naming names or exposing anyone, but making the lesson clear. Marianne's speech echoed through the bank lobby, her voice firm yet filled with emotion. She stood beside her mother, in front of the entire assembled team and a few customers who had been specially invited for the moment. "When I took the position of regional CEO 2 years ago," Marianne said, "I made a promise to myself. I promised that I would not measure my success solely by portfolio growth or branch expansion. I would measure it by the human impact we could generate. Because a bank is not made of money. It's made of people, of trust, of relationships." She paused, looking at the attentive faces before her. 3 months ago, this branch failed miserably in that regard. A customer was discriminated against, humiliated and ignored for hours, simply because her appearance did not match the stereotype of a valuable client. That customer was my mother. But it could have been the mother, father, or grandmother of any one of you. It could have been you on a bad day, dressed simply. Carmen stood by her daughter's side, her hands clasped in front of her, listening intently. Her silent presence carried immense weight. Marianne continued, "What happened here was serious, but it was not unique to this branch. It was a symptom of a culture that needed to change throughout our entire institution. A culture that valued appearance over substance, profit over ethics, numbers over humanity. And I decided that had to end." She gestured to the renovated branch around them. "Those of you here today are part of a new era. An era where human-centered service is not just a slogan on the wall, but a daily practice, where every customer, no matter who they are, is treated with the dignity they deserve. And the results prove we were right. This branch has not only improved in customer satisfaction, but also in financial performance, because people come back to where they are treated well, because trust builds loyalty." There was spontaneous applause. Paul, the new manager, smiled with genuine pride in his team. Alyssa, the receptionist, discreetly wiped away a tear. Ron, the security guard, clapped vigorously. Marianne raised her hand, asking for silence. "But I didn't come up here just to talk about victories. I came to talk about ongoing responsibility. The transformation we've started cannot stop. Every day, every interaction, every transaction is a chance to reaffirm our values or betray them. And I am counting on each and every one of you to always choose the right path." She looked at her mother, who nodded with an encouraging smile. "I'd like my mother to say a few words if she's willing." Carmen hadn't expected this, but she approached the small microphone they had set up. She cleared her throat, a little nervous. She wasn't used to public speaking. "Well, I'm not as good with speeches as my daughter," she began, drawing gentle laughter. "But I want to say one thing. When I came in here 3 months ago, I felt invisible. I felt as if my life, my time, my dignity didn't matter. And that hurts. It hurts a lot. Not because I'm a CEO's mother, but because I'm a human being." She looked around, connecting with each face. "Every one of you has the power to make someone feel important or to make someone feel invisible. I know your job is hard. I know you have targets, pressures, bad days, but never forget that on the other side of the counter is a person with a story, with struggles, with dignity. It could be someone who woke up early, took 2 buses and used their lunch money to pay a bank fee. It could be someone settling the last wishes of a loved one who has passed. It could be someone trying to rebuild their life after a tragedy." Carmen's voice grew firmer. "Treat every person as you would want your own mother to be treated, your grandmother, your child. Because in the end we are all the same. We all deserve respect, and kindness costs nothing, but it's worth everything." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by emotional applause. Several employees were visibly moved. A young teller was crying openly, and Carmen stepped down to hug her. After the ceremony, as people dispersed, Carmen asked to take a walk around the area. Marianne had more meetings, but she cancelled them all. This time with her mother was more important. They walked down Park Avenue, mother and daughter, side by side. Carmen still carried her grocery bag, now empty but which she kept for its symbolism. Marianne, despite her high heels and executive suit, slowed her pace to match her mother's. "You know what I'm most proud of, Mom?" Marianne asked. "Your job, I imagine," Carmen replied with a mischievous smile. "No, I'm proud to be your daughter, to have learned from you what really matters." Carmen squeezed her daughter's arm. "You were always smart, dedicated. I just showed you that success without character is failure." They stopped in front of an old bakery, a place Carmen used to frequent when Marianne was still a child, and they lived in a tiny apartment in the West Village. "Let's get some coffee," Carmen suggested. They entered the simple bakery, with its formica tables and plastic chairs. Marianne, in her designer suit, sat down without any awkwardness. She ordered a coffee and a buttered roll, just as she did when she was a teenager. "Remember when we used to come here on Saturdays?" Marianne asked. "I remember. You loved the buttered rolls here, said they were the best in the world." "They still are," Marianne said, taking a bite and smiling. They talked about the past, about the hardships they had overcome together, about dreams fulfilled and challenges still to come. Carmen told stories Marianne already knew but never tired of hearing. Stories of when she worked 3 jobs, of when she sold cakes to supplement their income, of when she saved every penny to buy the books Marianne needed for school. "You never complained, Mom, even when things were terrible." "Complaining wouldn't have changed anything," Carmen replied. "Working would, and I had you to raise. I had a purpose." When they left the bakery, it was mid-afternoon. They decided to walk a little more. It was then, turning a corner, that Carmen stopped abruptly. There, on the sidewalk, sitting on a stoop, was a young woman. A young woman Carmen recognized immediately. It was Jessica. The former bank employee was dressed simply in jeans and a t-shirt, a far cry from the elegant suits she used to wear. She was holding a few shopping bags and seemed to be waiting for someone. When her eyes met Carmen's, she turned pale. Jessica stood up quickly, hesitant. For a moment it looked like she might run, but then, gathering her courage, she took a step toward Carmen. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, her voice failing, I didn't expect to see you here." Carmen observed the young woman. She noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the weight she had lost, the humility in her gaze that had once been arrogant. "Hello, Jessica." Marianne positioned herself protectively beside her mother, but Carmen gently touched her arm, signaling that everything was okay. Jessica swallowed hard. "I wanted to. I need to apologize. For what I did, for what I said, for how I treated you. It was horrible. It was cruel. And there's no excuse. I know I was fired with cause and that I deserved it. But that doesn't take away the guilt. Every night I think about that day, and I feel so ashamed." Tears began to stream down the young woman's face. "I wasn't like that before. Or maybe I was and just never realized it. But now, after losing everything, having to start from scratch, feeling what it's like to be treated with contempt, I understand. I understand what I did to you. And I am so, so sorry." Carmen remained silent for a moment, studying Jessica. The young woman was clearly remorseful, but Carmen had lived long enough to distinguish true remorse from self-pity. "Did you learn your lesson, Jessica?" Carmen asked, her voice soft but firm. "I did. I learned it the hard way. I lost my job, my independence, my pride, but more than that, I lost respect for myself, and I'm trying to earn it back. I work in a store now. I don't make much, but I treat every customer, every person, the way I would want to be treated, because now I know how much it hurts to be on the other side." Carmen took a step forward and, to the surprise of both Marianne and Jessica herself, opened her arms and hugged the young woman. Jessica stiffened for a second, then broke down, sobbing on the shoulder of the woman she had humiliated. "I forgive you," Carmen said softly. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger hurts me. More than it hurts you, you made a mistake, a big one. But everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves the opportunity to be better." Jessica sobbed. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You didn't have to do that." Carmen pulled back, holding the young woman's shoulders. "I didn't have to, but I wanted to. Because kindness and forgiveness aren't weaknesses, Jessica. They are the greatest strengths a person can have. And I hope you carry this lesson with you for the rest of your life. That you treat everyone always with the dignity they all deserve." Jessica nodded vigorously, wiping her tears. "I will, I promise. I'm going to be a better person." "Good. Then I didn't waste my time that day," Carmen said with a small smile. The three women stood there for a few more minutes talking. Jessica told them about her new job, about how she was rebuilding her life. Marianne, initially skeptical, began to see genuine sincerity in the young woman. When they finally said their goodbyes, Jessica hugged Carmen one more time. "You are an incredible person," Jessica said. "I hope one day to have half of your grace." "You will if you choose. It every day," Carmen replied. Jessica walked away, waving as she disappeared into the avenue's crowd. Marianne looked at her mother with renewed admiration. "How do you do it, Mom? How can you forgive like that?" Carmen sighed. "Because I've lived a long time, honey, and I've learned that we are all imperfect. We all make mistakes. The difference is between those who learn from their mistakes and those who repeat them. That girl has learned. I saw it in her eyes." They walked back to the car that was waiting a few blocks away. On the way home, Carmen looked out the window, watching the city go by. New York, with all its contrasts, its injustices, but also its possibilities for redemption and new beginnings. "Mom," Marianne said, breaking the silence, "thank you." "For what, honey?" "For agreeing to do that test, for having the courage to go through that, for teaching me, once again, what really matters." Carmen smiled. "I should be thanking you for doing something with what happened, for turning my humiliation into real change for other people." The car stopped in front of the building where Carmen lived, an old but well-maintained building in Park Slope. Marianne got out and walked her mother to her apartment as she always did. Inside the modest but cozy apartment, filled with family photos and memories of a lifetime, Carmen made tea for them both. They sat in the small living room, the television off, just enjoying each other's company. "You know what makes me happiest about all of this?" Carmen asked. "What, Mum?" "That you didn't become like them. You made it to the top. You have power, money, influence. But you didn't lose your humanity. You didn't lose your ability to see people. Marianne felt her eyes well up. I learned from the best teacher. They talked until the sun set, painting the New York sky in shades of orange and pink. When Marianne finally stood up to leave, she hugged her mother for a long time. I love you, Mom. I love you too, my dear. Now go. Your family is waiting for you. After Marianne left, Carmen went to the window and watched her daughter's car disappear down the street. She smiled to herself, satisfied. There had been pain in this journey, but there had also been purpose. There had been injustice, but there had also been restored justice. There had been cruelty, but there had also been redemption. She looked at the faded grocery bag hanging on a hook near the door. That bag, which had been a source of mockery, was now a symbol of transformation. Carmen took it down and carefully stored it in a closet. One day, when her grandchildren were older, she would tell them this story. She would tell them about the importance of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of appearances. That night, before sleeping, Carmen said her usual prayer. She gave thanks for her blessings, for her wonderful daughter, for the opportunity to have made a difference. And she prayed that this lesson would spread, that it would touch hearts, that it would change minds. 3 months after that reunion with Jessica, the Park Avenue branch won an internal award for the best human-centered service in the entire National American Bank network. The transformation had solidified. Other branches began to follow its example. The Secret Shopper program expanded nationwide, and it all started with an elderly woman in a simple dress and a grocery bag who refused to be invisible. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Carmen and Marianne has touched your hearts and made you reflect on how we treat the people around us. If this narrative moved you, made you think, or simply entertained you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the stories we prepare with so much care. Hit that like button if you agree that every person deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or social status. And in the comments, we'd love to know, have you ever experienced a situation of discrimination or witnessed something similar? How did you react? Your stories inspire us to continue bringing narratives that matter. We publish new content every day that explores the complexity of life, the challenges of being human, and the victories of the spirit. This is just one of the many emotional journeys we have prepared for you. Thank you for being part of this community that believes in the power of good stories. We'll see you in the next video. Until then.